Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. We respect your time and especially coming out. You made it right before the rain, most of you. So congratulations on this stormy afternoon. So we appreciate you coming. I just wanted to welcome you to the City of Largo City Hall tonight and for our kickoff forum for the Housing for All initiative. We are glad you came out this way to really help us form some solutions to addressing some of the housing needs for our Largo residents. I have just a few housekeeping things first. So the restrooms are in the lobby if you need those, and there's some snacks and water in the lobby as well. We hope to utilize you for the full time tonight. So we do have a presentation for the first part, as well as some interactive surveys. And then we're actually going to break into groups, and you'll have a better chance to get a really discussion looking at some different housing types, giving your feedback, what parts you do like, what parts you don't like, what other things we could consider that we haven't, and where you might be able to see that type of housing going in Largo someday. Just to let you know, the staff and the consultants have facilitator tags on. So anyone with a printed facilitator tag, if you have a question, you can flag one of them down. And also we have Sheridan here tonight, who is our sustainability administrator for the City of Largo. And if you have any interest in learning more about our sustainability and resiliency action plan that's in process, and also how it correlates with the Housing for All initiative, you can visit ourfuturelargo.com for more information on that. So just as a note, we are recording this meeting. We have had interest from folks that weren't able to make it tonight and they want to learn about it. So I just want to let you know about that.
When you started just recently speaking, is it a given then that there will be housing going?
We're going to get to a whole thing. This is really about first finding out about the needs and then what are some options to help address those. So we'll be getting a little bit further into that. So here's our introduction for tonight. So we've told you a little bit about welcoming you here tonight. And we're going to explain a little bit about this Housing for All initiative, what it means, what's involved with it. And then we also have some information on, we've been doing an analysis on the housing needs in the community. So we'll share a little bit about that with you as well, and some opportunities that we may have to address some of those needs. Then, as mentioned, we'll break out in those group discussions. And then at the end, we're going to have a report back in this room with some of the key ideas from each of those groups, so you can hear from each other as well. We'll wrap up with sharing some of the next steps and how you can continue to stay involved. And here's a list of our different partners involved in this project. So the City of Largo is co-leading with Partners for Economic Solutions. They are the lead consultant on this project, and they have 4 different sub-consultants underneath that are doing different parts based on their niche. So we've got one that's focused on some of the engagement and some of the design concepts. We have one that is looking at our codes and analysis, as well as one that's even looking at different stormwater solutions for us as well. And then we're also looking at, we know mobile homes play a big part in our community, and we want to make sure that we have protections in place to, recognize that part of our community too as such a big part of Largo as well. So why is this important? So before the COVID-19 pandemic, almost half of Largo households were considered asset limited, income constrained employed, which basically means a lot of us are living paycheck to paycheck. So one broken down car, one medical bill could be the difference between paying rent or paying your mortgage that month. So during the COVID-19 pandemic in Largo, the rents went up 41% since 2019. Housing instability increased, as we also had some instability with incomes during that time as well. And we know that access to safe and healthy homes is a foundation for a strong community in Largo. So through some of our other public input processes we've had over the last few years, affordable housing and access to housing keeps coming up as one of the top ranked items. So you can see here, these are some of the different ways we reached out in the past. And obviously through this process, we're just kicking off this forum tonight, but we're going to continue public outreach for several months involving in this project as well. So the fundamental reason why we're doing this, or what's going to come of it, is we really know that we got to look within our own codes and systems to see what's keeping it from meeting the needs of Largo households that are wanting to live here, raise their kids here, retire here, and so forth. And so we know that really needs a different type of housing, or a variety of different types of housing to serve at different price points and meet the different needs of our community. And we know we have land constraints. So that's a big part of it. So how can we utilize some underutilized land in certain ways, or add in some smaller incremental housing? So most of what we're talking about tonight, and you'll learn more about missing middle housing, it's not the single family homes and it's not the skyscraper apartments. It's some of the little housing in between that fits in within our commercial areas and our neighborhoods and things like that. So you'll learn more about that. And fundamentally recognize that change won't happen overnight. So we are land constrained for the most part. So these changes aren't intended for a huge glut of housing to come online, which we know the need's there today and it will continue in the future. But we're hoping to keep addressing it incrementally in the future. So this project is including, it starts off with a housing needs analysis, which we've been through a good portion of already, and you're going to see some of that data tonight. It also includes an evaluation of our city codes to see what is outdated, what doesn't make sense in this era to have in our code anymore, to see if there's things that we could help make it a little bit easier for some of this incremental housing. And along with that, some recommendations will come out of it for different types of code changes to address those different types of housing styles. And then also there will be illustrations from those recommendations, so on some actual sites in Largo. So the residents, the commission, everybody can kind of grasp, like, what does this mean? What does it look like in Largo? And so those illustrations will be showing at a workshop, a virtual workshop in October. So residents, the public is invited to attend that and say, oh, I like this, but how would this work on this site? Or how would you do that? Or whatever the components may be, but you'll kind of get to work on some real sites and see how it may look in the community as well. So our project timeline, we've just been working on that initial, the needs assessment, the code evaluation. We have the forum tonight. The survey is open and we've got some cards we can share with you, and we welcome you to share those with your neighbors, your coworkers, anyone else you know in the Largo area, and let them be part of this process as well. And that'll be continuing for the next few months. Then that workshop I mentioned in October. And then we're hoping in January to have some workshops with our different advisory boards and our commission, so they really get a chance to ask those questions and kind of hash it out a little bit more. And then we'd work through the longer process for the actual adoption process for any code changes. So we're still looking about December 2024 for any of these code changes to take effect. But that's kind of the overlay, and we want to make sure this part is very important for the community input. And so we thank you again for coming tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
All right. Thanks, Errol. So I'm Josh Frank. I'm with Dover Cullen Partners. I'm a project director. Our main office is in Coral Gables, but I'm based out of Tampa. I was actually born in St. Petersburg, grew up in Oldsmar. So I'm a Pinellas County native. So it's great to be here working in my hometown or hometown region. So a couple quick polls just to get everybody up and running. I'm going to ask that everyone sort of get your phones out, ready to go. We've got some mobile phone text options available just to sort of get a sense of who's in the room tonight with us. So first, what I'd ask is just to get into the system to text 22333. Again, that's 22333. And you want to text that number, the word Doverkohl 516. That's DOVERKOHL 516. All one word, doesn't matter if it's lowercase, uppercase, if you're yelling it when you type it into your phone or if you're whispering it. Either way, it totally works. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Once you do that, you'll get a text message that says you've joined. It has a link in it and everything. Don't touch it. You're in, you're good to go. You don't have to do anything else. So I'll give you guys a few minutes. And once we're all in it together, we've got a few, I think 3 questions at least to get us going, and then a few later on in the presentation. So make sure you keep your texting app ready in the holster. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. So our first question is, what is your primary interest in the city of Largo? We've got 5 options. I live here. A. B. I work or own a business here. C. I work for a business or nonprofit that serves the Largo area. D. None of the above, but I visit Largo frequently. Or E. Other.
No, is the poll open already, or only when you go to the next slide?
Poll's open.
You can give multiple answers.
You can only give one. So we'll bring this up, and this should update live. So there we go. Yep, looks like 80% so far live here. Some work or and serve the area. Still looking for our first business owner or other. Anybody having any issues submitting an answer? Is it working for everybody? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, great. This is really helpful for us because it kind of gives us a sense at the 10,000 foot view, if we're near a representative sample, if we've got, a diverse array of folks sort of giving us some feedback, it really is a really helpful tool for us. This replaced a process that took a lot longer. Okay, great. Anybody still having any issues, need any extra time? No? Looks good. Okay, so it looks like we've got mostly residents, a handful of people that work and service the area, and then also somebody or a few folks who work or own a business in Largo. That's interesting because we've got some data that talks about all of that later on in the presentation. So next question is, how long have you lived, worked, or owned a business in Largo, or one that serves Largo? So A, less than 2 years, B, 2 to 5 years, C, 6 to 10 years, D, longer than 10 years, or E, I don't live, work, or own a business in Largo, or one that serves the city of Largo. So I'll leave this up for a second because that was quite a bit. So again, how long have you lived, worked, or owned a business in Largo or served in the city of Largo? So I'll switch over. Yeah. If you may have answered earlier, you may have to send it again just because I think once I switch to this slide is when it becomes live. So if you're getting an email back or a text back, there's no harm in sending it twice. All right, so a lot of long timers, 10 years plus. Excellent. Anybody having any issues with this question? Just want to make sure. Okay, interesting. So folks longer than 10 years, some less than 2 years, between 2 and 10, a little bit less. Great, a lot of passionate folks. Last one, and this is important, one word only, because if you send more than one word, it will send 2 different answers. So we found that out this morning. One word that describes housing in Largo today.
I'm completely lost here.
Go to the question.
Oop. Abby or Steve?
In transition.
In transition.
So it's 2 words there. Okay.
Okay.
So what this is going to do is it's going to update every time it gets a new answer, and any answer that's repeated or more common is going to be larger in font. So more than one person has submitted the word unaffordable, for example. So this helps us sort of get a sense of, a top 10. What's the most descriptive word for housing today? I actually think we have one other question following this one. So unaffordable, expensive, overpriced. I see an inadequate, challenging. You guys are really good at spelling too. These are all perfect. Uncoordinated. That's not always the case. Scarce, obsolete. One of the words we can't say on television. I'll let you ask George Carlin about that one. Spectrum. Lacking. Issues. National. Similar. Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is a similar question, and that is one word to describe housing in the future. So in the future, how would you like to see housing in Largo? So, for example, attainable or walkable, within one word, planned. That's a good one. Dense, upscale, scary, interesting. New, plentiful, inclusive, safe. These are all really helpful adjectives. When we go back and start to work on our site plan designs, we will take a lot of what we've heard from this, and this is all recorded, not just in Zoom, but we have the answers individually that we can actually start to break down into metrics and understand how many people said a certain thing versus how many people voted for something else. Or so what's helpful for us is that'll sort of fill in the blanks as we go back and start to look at what missing middle housing means for the city of Largo. Well, thank you for that, and I'm going to pass it over to Anita.
Hi, I'm Anita Morrison with Partners for Economic Solutions. We're leading the team the consultant team on this effort. So as we look through, the first thing we did was to look at your inventory and the supply of housing here in town. And what we found is it's pretty diverse. Unlike a lot of the cities that we work in, you actually have some of the missing middle already with 7% of your units are already in duplexes, triplexes, and quads. But the really striking piece about it is that you have 27% of your units are mobile homes. And so as we look at those mobile homes and they're aging, and we're seeing investors coming in and raising the land rents and buying out these homes, we know that's going to be an issue we have to address because that's so much of your affordability. So just to talk about your local economy, you have 57,000 jobs here in the city, but only 1 out of 10 workers actually live in the city. So that's a reflection in part because your housing is not affordable to all the people who work here. So they're having to drive to Pasco County to find the kind of housing they want. And that means that they're spending a lot more of their income on transportation than we really think is wise. So we often talk about housing plus transportation as an indicator of the affordability. And people from Largo are now spending 20% of their income on transportation costs. So that's a really serious number. And so if we can use this effort to get more opportunities for people to live in town, that could reduce some of the commuting that is so clogging up your roads. So we looked at the rents and what's happening in the local market. And as Errol mentioned, your rents have been up 41% in the last 3 years. That's unprecedented, really. So what's happened was you were going along, the blue line is your vacancy rate, and you've been historically 5 or 6%, which is pretty normal. That gives you time between tenants, so that's a healthy level. Then what happened, the pandemic hit, and in 2021, you had all these people moving into town. Your vacancy rate went down to 2.4%. And in response, the landlords all recognized that they could raise their rents in response to all that demand and excess of supply. So that's when you saw a 21% increase in 1 year. That rate of growth now and the rents going up has slowed, but the rents have not turned down. They're just going up more slowly than that crazy rate. So we talk about affordability and attainability in terms of how much of your income you spend on housing. So our ideal is that you spend less than 30% of your income. That gives you enough money to pay for transportation and medical care, food, and all the other good things in life. When we get to the point where you're spending more than 30%, we talk about your household as being cost burdened. So you're having to shortchange some of the other things that you would otherwise spend money on in order to pay your rent or your mortgage. And the last category, severely cost burdened, people are spending more than half of their income for housing. So then you really are making choices at the end of the month. Do you pay the electric bill or do you buy food? So that's where we're really concerned about that group. So we talk about affordability and attainability within categories of incomes, and we relate it to the area median family income. So in the Tampa area, The median family, that's not a household, it's just a subset of households, has an income of $89,000. And so then we look at those who make less than 30% of that amount. And here we're assuming a single earner household with 3 people in the household. So extremely low income, below 30%. I'm sorry.
When you say the Tampa area, what are you including Hillsborough County?
Yes, right. It's Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough. I'm forgetting one fourth one. Pasco.
Do you have any studies that just identify Pinellas?
Well, these categories are defined by HUD as a way to talk about housing affordability across a lot of different markets. And so they do it based on the metro area, which tells you it helps you understand what's your position within the metro area market. These incomes here on the chart are all Pinellas County incomes. So,
Do you have any income categories for just strictly retired person?
No, they fit largely. They'll fit in the extremely low if they're on just SSI, or with a pension, they may be at 30 to 50% under very low income. It's really a function of what their situation is once they retired. No, there's not a separate category for retired, right? So we look at extremely low income, very low income, so that could be your wait staff or hairdressers, and then low income, which goes from 50 to 80% of area median income. And that can be your police, bus drivers, postal clerks, a whole range of essential workers. So when we look at the owners, what we look at is how many of those by category are rent burdened. And if you look at the under 30%, we have over 1,400 households who own their homes, but they're spending more than half their income for their mortgage, but also their insurance payment and their taxes. And even in the 30 to 50% category, it's really 2,700 have a cost burden of some sort. Among renters, it's more severe. Under 30%, we have almost 2,500 households that are spending more than half their income. And then at the next level, it's another 1,400 households that are spending half their income. And it becomes much less of a crisis as you look at the higher groups, the 60 to 80, and then above 80, even less. So one of the groups that we're particularly concerned about are the seniors. And these are senior households that have at least one senior person living in the household. And what we found was in the lowest income group among the owners, where 69% of them have a housing problem. They have a cost burden, or they're living in overcrowded housing, or they don't have a full kitchen. And at 75% of the renters are in that situation. At the next level, 30 to 50%, we have 56% of our seniors, households with seniors have a problem, and 87% of the renters. So we're looking at this population that's growing as the population ages and as you have more migrants coming in and retiring to the location or to Largo. So that's a major thing that we're going to keep our eye on, and we're seeing it happen even in the homeless shelters. So the largest unmet needs at this moment, from what we can tell, are for homeowners. It's for people who are making 50 to 80% of area median income are finding that there's not housing that they can afford. And for renters, it's really anybody under 50% of the area median income is facing real issues. So as we talk about missing middle in terms of how does this help, our hope is that this creates more housing so we can address that issue of inadequate supply. We can help fill some of those key shortages. We can offer a greater variety of housing types. So a small unit, not everybody needs a 4-bedroom house. But if we can have a variety of townhouses and cottages, that can make a big difference. And then finally, we have limited land available for development, and so we need to use that land as efficiently as possible. So with that, I will hand it over to Victor Dover to talk more about exactly what is missing middle.
Thanks, Anita. Anita and I have a running argument about who has the best job in the world. She's an economist who comes help communities figure out it's the numbers, what they want to be when they grow up. I'm an urban designer and town planner. I use pictures, so I have the better job. But what we do in this kind of work is travel, working about half the time for local governments and community groups, but half the time for developers, not in the same place at the same time, and not in your town. But to figure out, how to help communities evolve to meet the changing needs. Now, you've heard reference to in the advertising for tonight's event and in some of our lingo conversation, this thing, missing middle. So I'm going to attempt to describe what it is, where the term really comes from, why it might be relevant to this conversation. We'll look at some examples of missing middle housing types, what they look like, how they fit, talk about their design just a little bit. And then I'll end with some example locations where you might find, when you get into discussing it, that you think missing middle housing might help. So what is this missing middle? First, remember, for several hundred years, from colonial times until the middle of the 20th century, Americans are really good at integrating wide variety of housing types in our neighborhoods. Not everybody could afford the big house. So not everybody was George Washington living in Mount Vernon with a plantation around him. People who didn't have as much might have a smaller house or a smaller yard. And that was just the way of the world. And we built our country with neighborhoods that had small houses and smaller lots integrated with larger houses and apartments and other types of housing. So really all we're talking about when we discuss missing middle is getting back in touch with that good old habit. There's a well-known thinker named Daniel Perolik, who's a friend of ours, who wrote a book about this, and he called it, curiously, Missing Middle Housing. And this diagram kind of describes why he thinks the middle was missing. From the middle of the 20th century until now, if you look around, most of what's been built has been single-family detached houses or apartments and condo complexes where you're building many dozens, if not hundreds of units at a time. And sometimes those are in big, tall buildings. But in between, there once were all of these other types of housing, and you have some of them historically, that accommodated people who had smaller households or households with more modest means, so they couldn't afford as many square feet, or on smaller lots using the land really efficiently, because we have not only the cost of constructing the building, but the cost of the land under it to try and reconcile. And missing middle is kind of about finding ways to design the neighborhood so that some of the units can have a lower per unit land cost, but the livability for everybody goes up. What are those types? Things like duplexes, which you have some of, triplexes, that's 3 units in the building, or a quad or fourplex. And from there, you can go up to other types like courtyard apartments or the bungalow courts, which were very famous in Florida in the 1920s and 30s, or townhouses or row houses. That's single family houses that are attached to one another. Multiplexes, which is just a way of saying a larger building that has multiple units in it. Maybe that's a mansion apartment or a single apartment building. Another traditional type is live-work combinations, where people had their small business in the same building where they had their home. And once you cover that spectrum, those are all the types which you call the missing middle, because for about 70 years, we haven't produced very many of those. And if we can figure out where to do it, we can take the land that's available and stretch it farther for our housing needs. Now, what do they look like? The first one on that spectrum is just a house or a cottage that has a small lot. So this is a case where along the street frontage, the street is divided, or the block is divided into narrow lots. and the houses are closer together, and then they might be detached from one another, like these examples. So we call these narrow lot single family houses. And the example on the left, like many coastal places, they have front porches. The example on the right, they're arranged more upright and semi-attached. Now, the next step, of course, is to let the houses touch one another. So row houses or townhouses and their cousin, those live-work units, look like this. And these might be wider or narrower. Think of the set of lots divided into lots like slicing a salami. You can slice, or pepperoni, you can slice thinner or thicker, and you get a wider or a narrower unit, right? And so as we learn to slice the units, slice the land into narrower lots and let the units touch one another, affordability goes way up. Because not only have we reduced the per unit land cost, but we've also lowered the construction cost and the energy cost in the building. So that's like the example on the upper left here. And then the lower right is a modern architecture example where someone's business is downstairs, and instead of just having one land use on that piece of land, that lot has two land uses, housing, or sometimes housing and offices or lodging upstairs. And that then decreases the per unit land cost. It also makes the neighborhood walkable. So if there's a coffee shop downstairs, you can walk down the block to your local coffee shop. Everybody wins. Now let's talk about the most basic, a house that has two units in it. Sometimes it just looks like one house, but has two doors. Like the example in the upper middle of this slide. Sometimes units are stacked one on top of another, like in a classic triple decker, as they call the one on the upper right. Sometimes the duplex looks like one big house, and it'd be on a corner lot. You can have one entrance from one side and one from another. So there are many variations on how to design a duplex or a triplex. These are nice because they fit into neighborhoods where all the other lots have single family detached houses on them. In many cases, a family will buy or build a duplex, live in one, and rent the other one out. So the income from the second one helps pay their mortgage. So this is a way of making both units more affordable. Now, the small apartment building, especially the classic Florida center hall buildings like the one in the center of the bottom row here, we used to build these in neighborhoods all the time. They would have houses across the street and houses on either side. But in the middle of that, you might have 8 units in a small multiplex like this. And as they grow a little bit larger, you start to think about having a little bit larger lot so you can efficiently park the parking spaces that are needed by the occupants of these buildings. You get strategic about including the on-street parking and that block or that corner lot as part of the supply. But this is still part of the missing middle because it's not 200 units, it's just a handful. The classic courtyard apartment buildings, which were common in the 1920s, look like this. And now we're talking about a development type where it feels like one continuous, built at one time development. And instead of everybody having a yard or a porch of their own, they share a common garden in the middle. That's courtyard apartment type. To drop down in size again, just for a second, to cottages. Some people, especially the vast number of new households that are being created where it's a single person living alone, find a small cottage appealing. And this is, I'm sure you've seen this on HGTV or in magazines or something in recent years. It's really kind of taken on a life of its own as an idea. You can group cottages together into a cottage court or a little pocket neighborhood around a courtyard or sharing a common street frontage. These are ways to kind of multiply the number of families or households that can live in the neighborhood. So a small, very small unit in terms of square footage, but it might have a generous ceiling height and lots of storage space or a sleeping loft for the grandkid. So it doesn't take a lot of land. And that's the key to the lowering the per unit land cost. Then there are accessory dwelling units. You probably know this by some of its other nicknames. Granny flats, sometimes called mother-in-law's quarters. It's called. Those both sound sort of sexist, gender biased names. But the accessory dwelling unit is just a small dwelling adjacent to or on the lot or within someone else's main home. So it might be above the garage, for example. One of the nicknames is a Fonzie apartment. Who remembers Happy Days? Fonzie lived in an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. So there are lots of variations on how that is done. Here are a couple of examples from Lakeland that I photographed last week. On the top of this picture, and these are on the same block, and one has masonry construction, and it's all very dressed up, and the other one is simple frame building with a kind of Florida vernacular vibe, and they coexist in the same neighborhood very, very well. At the bottom on the wide picture, you can see someone's main home and then the small accessory dwelling unit that's in their yard. Now that's an ideal place for the young cello teacher at the community college, or a child who's moved back home after going to college, for example, or for a retired grandparent who helps look after the kids in the afternoon, or it's part of an extended family. So there are lots of ways this can be useful. Now, if missing middle sounds appealing, like a good thing to do, makes you wonder why we aren't building more of it. And there are a lot of reasons, but the biggest reasons are zoning. Out of my long list of all the things that are become reasons why somebody doesn't build an ADU, mostly it's regulation. So that means regulatory reform is the key to getting this to happen if it's something that you'd like to see more of. And it's not hard to do. There are lots of folks setting the standard for how to do that. If you're interested in all of these missing middle types, you'll want to know that all over the country, small nonprofits and doers, especially young people who have started being interested in these ideas, have started teaching others how to do it. There's a group called the Incremental Development Alliance, or nicknamed IncDev, that puts on courses and has lots of materials on their website. You can go read about that. You might find that interesting. They have beautiful illustrations of many of the things I've just been describing, with dimensions and instructions on how to do it. So if you want to develop some of these missing middle types as a neighborhood scale investor, there are people out there who teach how to do that. But of all those groups that are out there explaining the value and benefit of ADUs, the biggest and the one with the most clout is probably the American Association of Retired Persons. I think officially they're just called AARP now. And AARP is one of the largest nonprofit interest groups in America, is really excited about ADUs. They have publications on it, websites on it, videos you can watch. And one of the things that's interesting about their materials is they point out that there are a lot of ways you can organize your accessory dwelling unit. It could be, like in the upper left here, detached from the main house, like I've showed you in some of those pictures. Or it could be attached to the main house. And of course, you've seen this when people either legally or illegally convert a garage to a small apartment, so they have some place for their nanny or a grandma or that cello teacher I was talking about. Sometimes they'll convert the attic or the garret. And so the accessory dwelling is actually upstairs above the main house. Now, across the bottom row, here's an example where it's inside the house, but on the lower level, usually accessible. The Fonzie unit is above the garage. This is significant because it means that the second floor above a garage might be taller or higher than the existing house. So you want it to be designed really well. And then the last one on the lower right, using AARP's diagram, is the converted garage that I was talking about. So what matters when you do any of these missing middle types? There's a lot you want to get right, but there are a couple of things that are most important. First is that they be street-oriented buildings. Nobody likes to have blank walls or big ugly parking lots or a bunch of garage doors lining the streets of their neighborhood. You'd like to see this kind of gentle infill development take place and have people feel like the neighborhood is more beautiful and more lovable afterward rather than less. So the key to that is doors and windows facing the streets. Just like we all like to walk by doors, windows, balconies, storefronts, and the like. Front porches, for example, rather than garage doors. So the design matters a lot. It's really important not to put the parking in front of the building. You can put the parking to the side or to the back, but porches and stoops on the front. These are the kind of things that make a building, whether it's big or small, street oriented. Well, what about the garden apartments, that don't have elevators but have stairways? And those, we're used to seeing those in big complexes. They actually can be street oriented buildings as well. Maybe there's not room for, 10 buildings with 200 units total in it. Maybe there's only room for one. But if you're smart about it, you can have the front of the building face the street in this street oriented way, and reinforce the street scene rather than taking it down. You want to see examples of this? They abound in our state, including new construction. Right over there in Newport Richey, there's a great example to go see of apartment buildings built in the neighborhood that are street oriented. This is what they look like. Here's one from Central Florida. And I find very interesting in these examples, the finished floor is elevated a little bit, which obviously in flood zone you'd be off doing anyway out of regulation. But when the first floor is elevated a little bit and its front porch sits a little above the sidewalk, that building has a lot of privacy in its interior, even though it's close to the street. Now, all these slides are being recorded and also will be available on the website. So if you want to go back and look at these examples, you can. Last thing I'll show you is like a kind of example of where you could find room to build such things. Remember Kmart? Remember Sports Authority? Remember Circuit City? Remember? Our aging commercial corridors are great candidates for thinking about adding these kinds of housing. This is an example of taking an old Kmart site and building it out redeveloping it as a neighborhood. Still has some retail, but mostly missing middle. And when you zoom in on that, you can actually see it's possible on a site that used to have just one thing, or two things if you count the parking and the retail. It's actually possible to have quite a variety. So this is all a design bonus for thinking in a street-oriented way. Last example I'll show you is, what about a parking lot? Well, you need the parking spaces. And if you've added new units, they're going to have some parking demand, right? Well, here's a clever example. That's a parking lot. But above the parking spaces, those are missing middle housing units, little studio and one bedroom apartments. Just move around the site so you can see. So some of the parking spaces are tucked under the building, and there's housing. So they captured lost space inside the city that they already had in order to make housing. And in the end, their street's far more beautiful than it was when it just had a parking lot. So we're going to take another quick poll to get your reaction to some of these things, and then I'm going to give you instructions for the interactive exercise. Josh?
Great. Thanks, Victor. So again, I'd ask that you bring out your phones and the text to the number 22333, Dover Cole 516. If you've got locked out, please raise your hand and we'll get you back in, but you should still be good to go. So the first question is, what do you think about encouraging more missing middle housing types in Largo? A, I like it. B, not sure yet, need more information. And C, I don't like it. Okay, so about 80% like it, 20% not sure yet, 5% don't like it. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question, which is, what do you think about allowing more types of ADUs? So the slide that Victor talked about with the AARP, in more Largo neighborhoods. Same, A, I like it. B, not sure yet, need more information. C, don't like it. So about 65% like it. Again, A, I like it. B, not sure yet. That's about 25%. And C, I don't like it. It's about 10%. Great. So I think we've got one last one, and that is, which of Largo's commercial corridors do you think have the greatest potential for new or additional housing? So that's similar to the last slide with the Kmart conversation. A being East Bay, West Bay. I'm just going to move ahead and read them. A, East Bay, West Bay. B, Missouri Ave. C, Clearwater Largo Road. D, Ulmerton Road. E, Keene, Starkey. And F, Belcher. I think there's an other as well. G is other.
All the above.
You can choose as many as you wish. Just keep sending answers.
This is one where, yes, you can select multiple answers if you prefer. We expected there might be that. So looking to be about 2-1 Missouri Ave compared to some of the other answers. So East Bay, West Bay, about 15. Clearwater Largo Road, 13 to 15, somewhere around there. It's been moving around. Ulmerton, 20%. Keene and Belcher holding up the rear. I'll leave this one up for another couple seconds. This one's got multiple options.
Commissioner, I always point out that this is not a representative, statistically valid sample of the electorate. It's really just the self-selected people who responded to the advertisement and gave up time, volunteered their time on a weeknight to come help tonight. So why do we do it? The answer is it'll help you have a better conversation. When you're in the next exercise, you'll be able to turn to your neighbor and say, why did you say that? Why did you pick that? What was your reason for that corridor? It is a statistically valid sample of the people who will give up time on a weeknight to come to the commission chambers and talk to their elected officials. So in that sense, it matters a lot. So we're going to switch gears, and Arrow and I will give you a little bit of instructions. You want me to start? I'll start off, and you can add anything I might have forgotten. First, remember that as we work in small groups, be respectful. Don't tear somebody else's ideas all the way down. Have a peaceful conversation. Build their ideas up with your improvements. It's more fun that way. But so what we're going to do is when you break into the small groups, each of you have a number on your name tag, and the tables are numbered. And Arrow, if you'll tell them which tables are where, we can do that. So there's a poster on every table. With every table, it has pictures like the ones I've been showing you. And each person in the group will get 8 green sticker dots. And what we'd like you to do is think about it first, look at all the pictures, and then put your 8 dots on the example that you find most appealing or you would like to see the most. And then talk to one another. Why did you choose that? And your facilitators at each of these tables have some instructions to prod you with some questions about those things, why you chose what you chose, and so on. And in the last few minutes, we're going to ask you to summarize your conversation by writing down your top 3 ideas. When we come back into the room at the end of the exercise, we'll have one person from each group report out the top 3 ideas from each table. Arrow?
I think that's it. So as we mentioned before, we're not having an official break, but there are restrooms and snacks on your way to your rooms. Check on your tag. You should have a red number. If it's 1 through 5, you're going to be in the very next room, which is the community room. And if you're 6 through 10, you're going to be in the cafe, and we've got facilitators to show you where that is. There's tabletops that have your number on them. If you got 11 or 12, we are going to consolidate. We weren't sure how big a group we would have, so we wanted to overplan just to make sure we had room for everybody. So if you're in 11 or 12, we're probably going to put you in some of the other groups in one of those 2 rooms. So come see anyone with a facilitator, and we can get you seated. And at this time, you can go ahead and head toward those areas. Thank you.
Listen for the 5-minute warning. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's all come back together in one group. If you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. Okay, that works with the Sunday school group too. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do now is we're going to hear the results of your mini conversations. We are going to ask the spokesmodels to go really fast. Let's try and keep each presentation to around 90 seconds. If you need a little more, I'm not going to cut you off. But the idea is to get all the groups a chance to present. So hold your questions and let those groups come in. We're going to hear boom, 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 their top 3 ideas. Okay? We are recording. I want to remind you that there are little cards at the door with QR codes on them that you can use to go to the website where all the material is already accumulating. And as this project proceeds, there will be more and more there for you to look at. So go back and check it. over the next few weeks as it gets more and more complete. So thank you all for what you did in the small groups. Maybe you know this, there was a great theologian named John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, who said, we only progress in small groups. And so what you just proved it, because it was amazing teamwork on display in those small groups just now. I think he meant spiritually, maybe we mean urbanistically or economically. So let's start with group one. We'll have you come up, and we are recording. You don't have to touch the mic. It's all just doing it automatically. Give us your quick rundown on the table one conversation. And then as you leave, Anita's going to collect your notes. So we want to get your notes so we can go back later and say, now, which group was this? All right, ready?
Yes.
Starting with group one. If you'd like to point to it, then you need it. Otherwise, just go for it. All right.
All right, well.
Now come around the back so you can get picked up by this mic, because we're still recording, and that way we'll hear your whole story.
All right, so 90 seconds. As you can see, we kind of congregated right here into the cottages. We really like the cottage approach. Second would be the townhomes. But our top three ideas were maintenance-free or low maintenance, zero-scaping as much as possible. The cottage really appealed to us for options to own and or rent. Small cottage to feel like home, right around 1,000 square feet, cozy, affordable, and economical. The words independent, detached, it was the closest to single family, kept popping up. The second most popular was independent, which was down here and here, but for the most part, with the townhome, we like the fact that, again, you're independent, but age is definitely a factor. There's steps on different ones. We like the fact that this was mixed-use retail. People were talking about heat on the first level or on the top level, but for the main part, maintenance-free, low maintenance, parking. Garage location and the traffic flow for existing neighborhood patterns should be adjusted and thought out, which as they always are. So that was pretty much our ideas. We did not like the single apartment buildings. We just felt that the examples given were very dated, we just felt that they were very dated. And if they were maybe a little bit more upscale, we would have liked them a little more, but we mainly blended over here into this side. That was pretty much our feedback.
All right, let's hear it for table one. Well, two. Couldn't have fans.
Hope I can live up to that little applause there. All right. So, unfortunately, it seems like our first two ideas kind of meshed together. Our first idea was to repurpose the commercial spaces along those corridors. Obviously, for development reasons, being cost efficient and utilize the space as efficiently as possible. We felt that it would take a combo approach. We felt most of these models could work pretty much anywhere in Largo. So with the commercial spaces, we felt the duplexes, the complexes, apartment communities would work. And in the residential areas, the duplexes, the cottages, and the townhomes could work. So it's not a one size fits all. So we have to utilize our space efficiently. And our third one was workforce, affordable, and senior housing. So we have to utilize these programs to be smart about how we get people into these houses and make it affordable and accessible to the various different groups that are coming into Largo, still living in Largo, and hopefully, everyone stays here. So.
Josh, have some pictures if you would. Let's hear it for table two.
So table 3 had major discussions around all of those things and narrowed it down to 3 top points, which you asked for. On item 1, we felt that everything that had a porch, had a community space, was very friendly, very welcoming, and very necessary for our community. That was our first priority in all of our selections. We favored high-density development where it fits the land, the size of the land, the area of the neighborhood as well. And aesthetics and design was crucial, that had to fit the neighborhood as well. So we were short and sweet, but had lots of discussion.
I'm waiting to see which group broke the rules and brought 5 ideas.
Well, we actually did. We had a few ideas. They picked me to do it because it was my first time here.
Isn't this fun?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's great. No, it was actually really good. So our top 3 ideas were build up, not out. But realistically, so like 5 stories probably was the cap. Duplexes, the tris, the quads, and the empty places. Also, the ability to renovate the existing single homes, which is kind of a cool idea. We also talked about transportation, having more connections, bike lanes, buses, shared vehicle lanes. I don't know if is this ours?
Yeah, we're right behind the table.
Right behind? Okay, well. So we were more focused on the small apartments and then the duplexes. We like those a lot. Yeah, so we got a lot done. I wanted to say one other thing. Oh yeah, the when we mentioned in the earlier meeting about the parking spaces, the big open areas and the commercial spots, about renovating those. That was a really good idea, and we wish we could have seen examples of those too. But that was pretty much it. Yep.
All right, group 5. We were a pretty intense group back there, really focused on these options. But overall, I would say we're all pretty open-minded. We felt that each option was preferred option in the right setting. They all serve different lifestyles, and we're all going through changes in our lives constantly. So someone might be looking for a townhome to own, or an apartment to rent of a different size. So having some flexibility was really important. We said that it'd be important to remind the community that these housing options already exist, and we could point to those if we wanted to help sway some public opinion. And finally, landscaping and design were critical. It seems that we picked most of the picks had paver stones and trees. So we like to see some nice outdoor landscaping. And additionally, even though this is a conversation about density, it seems as though that aesthetics were more important. I think what happens inside the building was less important than what happens outside the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Mike.
So I think we're all going to start hearing the same things over and over as we get to table 6. So actually, we like the accessory dwelling units, and that would be to allow additional housing on property that we already have. And because we have parents that are aging and need a small home to stay in, so coding would be an issue there. Secondly, we liked housing that emphasized vertical height, so garages underneath, and getting more units per land space was important. And then the street appeal, which we've talked about, and considering parking. Yes, that was a good one. So it's important because the more we build, the more cars we have and need places needing to be putting them. So kind of regrouping what everybody else said. So thanks.
All right, so we all decided that we thought all the options were good. They're all good, but some are better for certain places than others. So our first one is a variety of housing types placed appropriately. Density along traffic areas, higher traffic areas and routes, better use of existing developed land, and unused commercial areas. 2, housing types that foster a stronger sense of community. We really like the places that had shared amenities, a communal feeling, and common areas that people could gather and congregate and know their neighbors better. And then the last one is housing that has a mixture of uses within the same area, and referring to mixed use, things that have both residential, commercial, retail options, we think would help. So that's it.
Have you done this before? You guys are really good at this.
All right, we liked the townhomes in the first column. Thought that was a good choice around here. The cottages were also favored in our community. It was emphasized that we wanted lots of green space and walkability before development. So that was our priorities, and I think am I the last one?
Super clear. Can we get every group? What about next
So
steps?
just to let you know the next steps, we really want you to fill out the survey that you'll find on largo.com/housing for all. There are cards that Arrows,
I think they passed them out.
oh, passed out already. Yeah, so if you want to take advantage of those, encourage your neighbors to respond and to contribute. Yes?
I was just thinking, there's one thing we didn't address is when we look at some of this housing.
Yeah,
Transportation is not great in Pinellas County.
you're right.
County, and
Right.
they need to be accessible to some kind
Yes.
of transportation.
Right.
When we live there.
Right. Yeah, that it all works together. Yeah. Okay. So then the next time we want you all to come together, well, virtually, we're going to meet online on October 18th, and we'll have some drawings of different sites to help illustrate what this might look like. So to, help picture what this could turn into. And then if you watch the website, there are a number of other opportunities. Then we encourage you to contribute and give us input all the way along.
I want to thank you all for coming out, and I wanted to recognize we have Mayor Woody Brown joining us tonight. We also have Commissioner Robinson, Commissioner Gerard, and Commissioner Johnson, who are here to find out what you have to say. It's good to hear straight from people, right? What their thoughts are along the way. So we appreciate you coming out, and definitely a huge thank you to all of you on this rainy night for sticking it out for 2 hours with us tonight to give us your feedback and help really shape some housing options for current residents, and also as we look forward ahead for our community as well. So thank you, and yes, sir.
Can you point out to some folks who may not have heard or know that every picture on these boards is an example from the state of Florida that already exists? They're not in these quarters.
Is that confirming?
Just about. So
Just about, almost
so
all
for
of
the
them.
purposes of the mic. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. So almost all the pictures as examples, the question was, are these from Largo? So almost all of these, yes, are from Florida. So they are occurring within our communities, both in the county and throughout the state of Florida as well. And I think Anita already touched on, you can visit Housing for All, largo.com/housing for all to keep up to date on what we're doing with this and look for future events in the survey link. Also, just to touch back on how this links in with the Sustainability Resilience Action Plan, you can visit ourfuturelargo.com for more information. And I see yet another commissioner. Good morning. Hi, Commissioner Hulk, for joining us too. So I wish you all a wonderful night. Feel free if you have questions. There's comment cards too. If you have a specific question you didn't get answered tonight, put your email on there and we'll follow back up with you. There's also a way on the website, on the webpage, if you want to get up-to-date emails. Like when we send out invites for the virtual meeting in October and you want to be on the list to get an email about it, we'll definitely send one. It's just on that link on the website to sign up to do that. So have a wonderful evening and thank you for coming.